this illustrates, and it's not just because I'm in it, but I can tell the story firsthand, but this illustrates how you couldn't fucking get anything accomplished with the talent that you knew could get over and you wanted to use. Flair, thank you very much. Flair had already said he thought we all thought Brian Pillman was going to be a star, right? And that's why he wanted to work with Brian Pillman on that show that did a tremendous rating just a few weeks previous. And he, at one point, had thought of working a long-term singles program with Brian, but Brian needed to be ready because he hadn't been there long, and he wasn't really over as a top guy. Mm-hmm. And I sat down with him right about the time. As a matter of fact, this show was probably written right before Flair quit because we taped it a week later or whatever. I sat down with Rick. I said, Rick, all these fucking guys, all the programs we try to start, somebody has a problem, or Sid gets hurt, or Spivey gets hurt, or somebody no-shows or whatever. Give us Pillman. We'll get him the fuck over. And I'm not saying that Brian, we had to lead him around like a child, but that's you took established talent and you used them to get new talent over. I said, give us Brian Pillman and we'll get him over, and then we'll hand him off to you, and you do your fucking thing like you did with Sting, and you make him a fucking star. Rick said, okay, yes. How do you get a babyface over? You find a weakness or an Achilles heel, and the heel wrestlers exploit that weakness surreptitiously with criminal methods and fucking do him wrong, and then the babyface has to fight using his guts and his courage and his superior intellect and his never say die attitude, and he overcomes the insurmountable odds and gets his revenge, right? I found out that, you know, the scar that Brian had on his throat and his raspy voice. Brian Pillman was born with a rare form of some kind of throat cancer. And by the time he was 3 years old, he had 24 operations on his throat, which is what left that scar and led to the raspy voice. And I said, what? Because I said, we're going to get some death threats with this. I want to get more death threats than we got when we set Ronnie Garvin's face on fire, right? That's why in Altoona that night, we had a simple match with Brian Pillman and Z-Man. I think it was for the U.S. tag title at that point. And in the match, at the end of the match, all kind of shit breaks loose. And you know the Midnight Express Vegematic, where Stan lays the guy out in the bear hug and Bobby came off the top with the leg drop. I fucking put my racket on Pillman's throat. Bobby does the leg drop. Pillman sells it like crazy. Then we have a bunch of people panic running in, and it was an old Mid-South or Memphis angle where guys are running in and we're hitting them with the racket. We're nailing them off. We're playing King of the Hill. We're trying to get some fucking fans to come in. I wanted some people to fucking hit and help, right? Because we got to have some fucking chaos here. I want an element of danger. I want to make people think that Brian Pillman is fucked. And then the story was going to be that we had re-injured and re-damaged the restorative surgery that had been done to him as a child, and that he, as a result, may never speak normally again and may have to undergo all that shit again. And we even did interviews. This was why I called it the Phantom Angle, because this shit didn't air, and I'll tell you why in a second. We did interviews with Brian, unable to talk, doing this. And Zink having to talk for him, which that was only going to be temporary, but the whole thing was Brian's voice and what we had done to him, and we were going to run this program because Flair knew that Midnight wasn't going anywhere, and we could count on us. We were going to run this whole fucking angle where we had these return grudge matches with Pillman and Zink over the U.S. Tag Team title, culminating with a big blow-off where if they won, then Brian would be able to get his hands on me or whatever, the old 5-minute deal. And in my mind originally, before that match would happen, we would bombard fucking Zink and put him out of the picture. So now Pillman has no partner. So, I guess that match ain't going to happen. You ain't going to get your revenge. And Pillman would insist on fighting both the members of the Midnight Express rather than give up his chance. And he would beat both members of the Midnight Express in a handicap match and then jerk me in and beat the shit out of me and beat me. So in one night, in one match, Brian Pillman, this new up-and-coming star, would beat one of the most decorated tag teams in NWA history, former World Tag Team Champions, both of them by himself, and then kick the shit out of me. And then, here you go, Rick. Now you take him and do the Sting Clash of Champions thing. That's the way you make a fucking star, by the way. Guess what happened? After we tape all that shit, and you get started with the stuff that was scheduled to air on the formats that Rick, as Booker, had blessed and that we had written, We go in the next week in the committee meeting, and Barnett says, well, we're not going to do that. What? I think it will make Brian look weak. What if we want to do the thing with the throat, we can do it with top guys. So basically, he had, like that, saying Midnight Express weren't top guys. And it was because Herd had, I don't know, somewhere or another, either he was saying what Herd wanted to fucking hear, or Jim was enamored of Brian, or whatever the fuck. But they let the angle run, but they took out the whole throat injury thing, and just fucking everything was normal from then on out. And Barnett looked at me and said, if it doesn't draw, blame me. And I told him, I think about 6 months later, Jim, it didn't draw, and I blame you. Right? So at that point, that's when I'm starting to percolate. But I got to get out of here too, just like Rick did. But that was, you got all these things they're doing to try to get some of these fucking schlubs over that we'll get to later on in the year, and giving them fucking all this money and everything. And a guy like Brian Pillman, we're letting him do everything but sodomize us with rusty fishing knives to get him over, and they ixnayed it and even took back some of the shit that was taped. Because Herd didn't like the Midnight Express and me, Barnett liked Pillman. I've never got a suitable explanation, but it will make him look weak. He knew better than that. He'd been in the business for 30 years. He invented the fucking wrestling business. He was Herd's hitman in that. Herd didn't want us, because our contracts also were coming up in April, and Herd didn't want us in a main event position.
Well, I was going to say, because it was you guys is the reason.
Yes, and also because he was trying to, when we get to May, he was trying to split the Midnight up, and didn't even want to re-sign them. And he knew our contracts were up in April, and because Herd was, in kind of a way, he's kind of like Heyman. He always thought there was an ulterior motive to something. Instead of us trying to get Brian Pillman over, he thought we were trying to get ourselves over when contract came up, so we could hold him up for more money. That's the only reason that's the only thing I've ever been able to figure.
In helping Brian and helping Rick.
Well, because it's putting us on TV, and Herd is not smart to the wrestling business. He just thought it was, we're putting ourselves on TV because we're on the booking
They're
committee.
going to be beat by one guy.
Well, he didn't even get that far. We didn't even make it past the goddamn angle.